June 1942, Cairo. In a basement office of British intelligence, a desk fan only stirred the heat. M slid a sheet of paper toward her. Outside Berlin, Sachsenhausen, paper specialist. Rommel is 300 kilometers from the Suez Canal, M said. For every kilometer his tanks advance, they burn 2,000 liters of fuel. The Mediterranean is swallowing our tankers faster than we can launch them. Meanwhile, the Germans are printing counterfeit pounds, Operation Bernhard, using Jews in the camps. They are missing one thing, someone who can crack the Bank of England's paper. 3 months earlier, she had been an assistant researcher at the University of Manchester, measuring how fibers aged, how a sheet softened, how ink bled with time. Now she was being asked to go to Berlin and pass as a German expert while she watched paper turned into a weapon. "I need a new name," she said. "Claire. Paper chemistry. Technical University of Munich. Your father owned a mill. Died in 1938. Your papers have been altered and reissued under your name. In 2 weeks you will be invited by the German Industrial Association. They need your expertise." He said it all as if he were reading from a ledger. She heard what he did not say. If she vanished in Berlin, no one would mourn her publicly. No file would admit she existed. She nodded. She did not ask the price. She already understood. If she failed, no one would claim to have met her. July 1942. Berlin. The Reich banknote plant hid in a corner of Sachsenhausen, a warehouse outside and a machine inside. While Claire waited at the entrance, the presses thundered deep within, a sound that later returned in her sleep like metal insects chewing paper. Colonel Oberst greeted her himself, uniform sharp, eyes heavy with fatigue. His handshake was dry and measured, the practiced touch of a man used to judging strangers in a second. "Your work on linen paper durability," he said in German with an East Prussian accent. "We need that experience. Come." He walked her through the shop. Men in grey prisoner uniforms moved under guard, yellow stars pinned to their chests. Their faces were hollow, but their eyes stayed alert. Ink dust clung to knuckles. A young prisoner adjusted a watermark roller with surgeon precision. He looked up at her once, then dropped his gaze. In that glance she felt the question, guard or kin. "They are experts," Oberst said, as if listing tools. "Jews, but skilled. They obey." Claire kept her expression flat. Her task touched these men, but not yet. For now she had to be a scholar with a privileged pass and a clean coat. "What do the British use for pound paper?" she asked, letting eagerness colour her voice. "Linen and cotton, but what ratio?" Oberst smiled. "That is why you are here. We have genuine notes acquired through Swiss banks. Analyze them, find the formula, reproduce it. Very simple." Simple, she thought. If it were, Britain would already be ruined. August 1942. Outside Berlin. The lab gave her genuine pounds to cut, soak, burn, and examine until her fingertips smelled of fibre and solvent. Under a lens she traced the twist of linen threads, the shorter bite of cotton, the way a security thread sat in the sheet like a nerve. She wrote ratios, ran small pulps, checked how watermarks took under pressure, how ink sat on the surface instead of sinking in. The work was the same as Manchester, except for the guards at the door and the men in grey uniforms who never stopped watching the clock. Prisoners with numbers, not names, carried samples and recorded data. 138, 142, 157. They spoke only when necessary. Once, passing her number 138, murmured Hebrew too fast to follow, but inside it she caught a shard of English. Hope. She did not respond. She could not. Even a glance held too long could be read as allegiance. She delivered her report in mid-August. The paper was 75% linen and 25% cotton. The watermark came from a specialized roller. The ink held trace iron. Oberst was satisfied and drew her deeper into production. But her real mission was not to copy pounds. It was to make them fail at a chosen moment. She needed a catalyst that would sit harmlessly in ink and paper at room temperature, surviving handling, storage, transport, inspection. Yet under the Sahara's noon ultraviolet, it had to turn active, oxidize the ink, and force a mark to rise from the sheet as if the sun itself were confessing. She tested 7 formulations in secret, hiding the trial strips among routine samples, timing their reactions under lamps, discarding anything that acted too early or too weakly. In the end, she chose a compound extracted from desert moss. The remaining problem was practical and deadly: how to slip it into the pulp without anyone noticing. Every additive in a banknote plant was logged. Every barrel of chemical was counted. Oberst trusted her, but trust in a place like Sachsenhausen was only another kind of restraint. She waited for a gap in attention, a shift change, a moment when speed mattered more than caution. Then she disguised the compound as a routine stabilizer, measured in small quantities that would not change the pulp's feel, and supervised its mixing as if it were merely another refinement of the formula they demanded from her. She told herself the men at the vats were not accomplices. They were forced hands. But she still watched their faces as they worked, and still felt the weight of what she was putting into their world. Her opening came through Lieutenant Hans Meyer, 23, a technical officer who began turning up at her lab door with leftover bread, sometimes cheese. He asked about Munich, about her father, about the life she invented. She lied until the lies sounded like memory. He liked to talk. He liked to be listened to. In a factory where everyone watched everyone, being heard felt like mercy. One night he said, voice low, "Those men down there know they will be killed when the printing ends. Some of them act as if they are already ghosts." Claire kept her eyes on her data. "Before the war ends," she said, "no one knows how they die." Hans studied her as if she had handed him a secret. He liked her. She let him. When he mentioned an inspection, a schedule change, a shipment route, she stored it, turned it into a code and hid it behind a panel in the lab ventilation duct. She did not write long messages, only tight facts, dates, cargo lists, names already known to London. Every 2 weeks someone retrieved the slips. She never saw the courier. She only knew the code name, the gardener. Early September, Oberst convened a meeting. Major von Kleist, the logistics officer, sat stiff in the room like an old statue, a saber scar on his face and a soldier's suspicion in his stare. "The blockade is tightening," von Kleist reported. 2 of 3 tankers scheduled for September were sunk. Rommel needs 800 tons of fuel a day at Alamein. Current reserves last 2 weeks. Without October deliveries, we consider retreat. Silence held. Oberst looked to Claire. "Miss Claire, your production." She opened her notebook. "By the end of September, we can print £5 million. The question is how to deliver it to North Africa." "Transport is the Army's problem," Oberst said. "Are we transporting fuel or paper?" Claire asked softly. Von Kleist's head snapped up. "A tanker carries fuel once," she went on, calm, as if reading a chart. "Paper can be traded for fuel, food, anything. It is lighter and easier to disguise. A freighter with raw materials is harder to target than an oil ship. If paper sinks, we lose raw stock. If fuel sinks, it is already dead." Von Kleist's fingers whitened on the table. "You want us to cancel tankers and ship your paper? Optimize, Major. You are not choosing better. You are choosing what dies more slowly." "Tankers are our bloodstream," he said. "And if most of the blood spills before it reaches the body," she answered, "what then?" Oberst ended the argument with orders. Von Kleist would submit tanker loss numbers. Claire would submit a shipping feasibility plan. Next meeting, a decision. Back in the lab, she left a note for the gardener. "Induction has begun. Target is accepting." September 15th, the second meeting. Von Kleist's report was blunt. Convoy losses had reached 74%. At that rate, October fuel delivery would be under 20% of need. Claire's report matched his coldness. By mid-October, the plant could produce £8 million, enough to pay local tribes for 2 months of fuel. Required tonnage was a third of equivalent fuel. An SS liaison from Berlin listened in silence, watching von Kleist with faint contempt. Oberst asked, "If I give you 10 tankers, how many reach North Africa?" Von Kleist took too long to answer. 30%, at most. If I give Miss Clare 10 tons of paper stock, how likely is £8 million? Over 90, Claire said. If the raw stock enters the plant, I can turn it into money. The SS liaison gave a small nod. His eyes slid to Claire as if weighing her like another instrument on the table. Then we reallocate tonnage, Oberst said. Cancel 3 tanker voyages. Ship paper, pulp, and ink. Von Kleist surged to his feet, face dark. This is suicide. This is mathematics, Oberst replied. We cannot gamble on 30. Von Kleist turned to Claire. The look was not hate, but despair, as if he were watching a world he understood being replaced by rules he could not fight. You will regret this, he said, and left without saluting. As Claire gathered her papers, the SS liaison spoke at her shoulder, quiet enough that only she could hear. Your logic is clean. But tell me, Miss Claire, do you truly believe paper is more reliable than fuel? She met his gaze and kept her voice level. I believe in data. Data does not betray. Outside the meeting room, the presses thudded below, a heartbeat and a countdown. That night, Hans met her in the corridor with a small box of chocolate. Von Kleist says we will die because of you, he told her, half warning, half pleading. I do not understand war, Claire said, but I understand tanks without fuel are corpses. Hans watched her as if trying to read a book written in a language he did not have. September 18th. Von Kleist signed the tanker cancellation order. His hand shook, ink bleeding into a stain. Claire read the signature and felt the trap click shut. The Germans had cut off their own fallback. She left another note for the gardener. Cancellation signed, backups gone, prey in the trap. That night, rain came, thin and cold. She dreamed of von Kleist, standing in a desert of dead leaves. When he looked at her, gasoline ran from his eyes and burned on his cheeks. He asked the same question again and again, as if it were the last thing he could hold. Do you really believe in data? September 20th. From the second-floor corridor above the print hall, she watched the presses spit sheets at 120 per minute. Ink and bleach stung her nose. Number 138 adjusted the watermark roller with impossible steadiness. 600,000 a day, Hans said beside her. By month's end, 8 million. You did it. Those prisoners did, she answered. Hans hesitated. People are asking why we ship paper instead of fuel. Some think your plan is too perfect. When Claire looked down again, number 138 met her gaze and moved his lips. Hop. Watch out. That afternoon she returned to the lab and found her desk searched, drawers shifted, folders out of order. A hidden slip of paper was gone. It was not the gardener whose work was always invisible. The gardener would have left the room cleaner than before, the way a careful thief leaves no edges to catch on. This search was rough, impatient, done by someone who did not understand paper or codes, only suspicion. She replayed the day in her head. She had been on the shop floor from 10 until noon, then in the canteen. Between noon and 12:30, the lab had been empty. 30 minutes, enough for a key and a frantic hand. She listed possibilities without writing them down. A cleaning woman, guards on rotation, technicians with keys, officers with access. Motive narrowed the list faster than time did. Whoever it was, they had been sent to find proof, not to understand what the proof meant. She reached the only conclusion that mattered. Someone was hunting, and the search would not stop. That night she moved the dead drop. She sealed a message in waxed paper and wedged it into a crack outside the lab windowsill where only a climber could reach. The gardener could. Most others could not. September 25th. Oberst asked for the delivery plan. Claire proposed sea shipment disguised as industrial raw materials, neutral routing, transfer at Tangier. Von Kleist challenged her. Tangier is full of British agents. If they find counterfeit pounds, they will warn London. They will be too late, Claire said. By the time they verify, the notes will already be in North Africa. Von Kleist stepped close. "You know the British well." "I know anyone who can ruin the plan," she said. "If you suspect me, say it." "I do not suspect you," he answered. "I suspect perfection. Perfection is usually a trap." "Wind makes perfect dunes," she said. "Sometimes conditions fit, sometimes nature is flawless." She left his stare pinning her back. October 1st, Berlin. The first shipment departed. 12 crates, £500,000 each, 6 million total. Destination? Tangier, then onward to a site to be named. The freighter was the Santa Maria, flying the Spanish flag. In its hold, the crates sat among real goods, cotton bales, rubber, tin ingots, the ordinary weight of war economy hiding the strange weight of paper. Claire did not go to the docks. She stood at the window and counted forward. Arrival. October 13th. Meeting soon after. Transaction October 24th at noon. She had to be gone before then. October 5th. Hans came to her pale. Von Kleist's people arrested Becker, a technician. They found a shortwave radio. He listened to the BBC. Becker was not the gardener. The gardener would never leave such evidence. Still, the arrest meant fear was rising, and fear made mistakes contagious. The wrong man could be used as a lesson for the rest, and lessons travelled fast in a camp. Hans asked her, whispering, "If there are spies here, would you want me to know the truth?" "Truth is heavy," she said. "One person cannot always carry it." At the door, he said, without turning, "You are a beautiful cover. I cannot read the words. Now I'm afraid the book is not what I wanted." October 10th. Oberst set the transaction site, an oasis near the Libyan border, 200 kilometers from the Alamein front. Time, October 24th at noon. "Why noon?" Claire asked. "The merchant says midday light is honest," Oberst said, amused. "Best for examining notes." Claire smiled because the midday sun was honest in exactly the way he did not mean. October 15th. She sent her last message to the gardener. Oasis, October 24th noon. Extraction late night. October 23rd, Tangier port. A route, a time, a handoff. That night she walked once more with Hans beyond the plant fence, leaves whispering underfoot. "When the war ends," he asked, "what will you do?" "Find quiet work with paper," she said. "No politics." "And me," he said thinly. "I may not live to see it end." "If you survive," she told him, "do not hate. Hate turns you into what you hate." He looked at her in moonlight, bright-eyed and uncertain. "Are you saying goodbye?" "War teaches people to practice goodbyes," she said. October the 20th. The Santa Maria reached Tangier. The crates moved to 3 trucks under a German intelligence escort, driving east toward Libya. Back in Sachsenhausen, Claire pretended to test a new formula while her hands shook. 4 days. Then the crates would open under the noon sun. Late night, October 22nd. She claimed illness, packed a small bag and hid 1 sample counterfeit note in her clothing. A personal souvenir that would change color in harsh light. At 2 in the morning, she climbed out a back window, crossed the woods, crawled through a hole she had cut under the wire fence and kept moving despite torn cloth and blood. She had cut the wire over weeks in slivers of time, hiding the bright metal with mud, memorizing guard rhythms by listening to their boots. Now, sliding under the fence, she felt the wire snag her sleeve, felt the sting where skin opened, and kept her breathing silent. The work of escape was as careful as lab work, only faster, and with a different kind of measurement. Distance, shadow, time. At 3:15 on a country lane, a truck without lights arrived. A hand pulled her into the cab. The gardener spoke no words, only handed her a farmer's coat and drove west and south. She curled low, hearing the engine and, behind it in memory, the presses that never slept. Evening, October 23rd, Tangier port. She wore a headscarf and plain clothes, passing for a local woman. A small freighter waited, Portuguese flag, bound for Gibraltar after midnight. She watched the African coastline darken into a single line and thought of the crates far inland, waiting for dawn. At 2 in the morning the ship sailed. Wind cut cold across the deck. She pulled the coat tight and pictured the desert noon she would not witness, the sun that would do in seconds what no inspector could do indoors. October 24th, noon, an oasis near the Libyan border. Sun struck straight down. Sand temperature climbed past 50 degrees Celsius. Captain Hans Meyer, now escorting the convoy for intelligence, opened the first crate and lifted a crisp stack of notes. Across from him stood the fuel merchant, Abdullah bin Zayed, with 4 guards and 10 drums of aviation fuel. Meyer handed over the notes. Bin Zayed squinted in the glare, checked the watermark, the thread, the serial numbers. He ran his thumb along the edge as if he could feel honesty in the grain. He nodded. Acceptable. 10 drums for 6 million. Fair. Crates shifted. Drums rolled. Soldiers watched each other with hands near weapons, not because of honor, but because trade in the desert was always one mistake away from blood. Then a shout snapped the air. One of the merchant's men held a stack of notes, fingers shaking, the edges yellowed as if singed, spreading inward with violent speed. Meyer grabbed the stack. Under the sun, the paper dulled to the color of dead leaves, and a deep brown word rose through the surface. FALSCH. He tore open another stack. The same. Another. The same. He held the paper up, turned it, as if angle could change chemistry, as if denial could block light. The word kept blooming through the sheet, not printed, not stamped, but rising like a bruise. Bin Zayed's surprise hardened into a cold smile. Germans, he said softly. You tried to cheat me with false money. It was real yesterday, Meyer blurted, and then understood why yesterday had been safe. Bin Zayed stepped back. His guards lifted rifles. For an instant the oasis held its breath, heat and dust and disbelief suspended together. Meyer reached for his pistol, but his own men caught his arm. Do not shoot, someone hissed. Withdraw. German soldiers scrambled for the trucks. Bin Zayed did not chase. He did not need to. The crates were proof enough, and the desert was wide enough to swallow fools without help. As the convoy fled, wind lifted loose notes and carried them into the air like autumn leaves. October 25th. Before dawn. Gibraltar. Claire woke in a safe house near the Royal Navy base. The walls smelled faintly of damp stone and tobacco. Outside, harbour lights glittered, and distant thumps might have been drills or war. She could not tell. M entered with a telegram. Success, he said. The deal failed. The merchant withdrew. The Africa cause has no fuel. Rommel has ordered retreat. She read the lines and saw, in her mind, the notes turning in sunlight. Von Kleist's despair. Hans's unreadable eyes. Number 138's lips forming hop. Meyer, she asked. What happened to him? Relieved. Under investigation, M said. It does not matter. You cut their lifeline. Claire went to the window. Dawn brightened the sea. She felt tears and could not name them. Not victory, not grief, something in between, like a tide pressing against her ribs. October 26th, Mediterranean Sea. The last 2 tankers out of an Italian port were sunk near Sardinia. 8,000 tons of fuel went to the bottom. The Africa Corps reserve fell to 0. November 4th, Alamein. Rommel ordered full retreat. Tanks were abandoned in the sand, gun barrels angled at the sky like gravestones. May 1943, Tunisia. Axis forces surrendered in North Africa. 250,000 German and Italian troops became prisoners. In London, Claire read the report over afternoon tea and scanned for names she could not find. Hans, von Kleist. The war was not finished, but her part of it was. In the months that followed, Operation Bernhard did not end. The presses at Sachsenhausen kept running, 600,000 notes a day. Intelligence estimated 8 million fake pounds printed, face value over 130 million, with a third already pushed through neutral banks into Britain, Europe, even South America. The Bank of England noticed anomalies but dared not admit them. Admission would shake wartime stability. Claire asked M about the prisoners, especially number 138. "They are alive for now," M said. "The Germans need them printing. After the war, they may kill them to erase the secret." Claire held that word in her mouth, secret, and tasted ash. All she could do was keep working and keep hoping the men in grey would outlive the machinery built around them. June 1944 brought Normandy. She heard the radio announce the largest landing in history and watched strangers cheer in the streets. She remembered the moon above the wire fence the night she escaped Berlin. The same sky, different worlds. April 1945 brought Berlin's fall and Sachsenhausen's liberation. The plant was wrecked, documents burned, but warehouses still held piles of counterfeit notes, roughly 8 million recovered on site, face value 134 million. In today's purchasing power, the report said it was like £5 billion. Reading those numbers, Claire's hands shook. She could see her own fingerprints on a craft that had outlived its creators. M told her a survivor had been identified. A Polish printer named Solomon Weitzman, once known only as number 138, now in Israel. "Do you want to contact him?" M asked. "No," she said, after a long silence. "Let him live his life." On May 1, 1945, the Bank of England withdrew all notes above £10 and forced an exchange, citing fear of enemy sabotage. Britain queued in panic, clerks working into the night as people clutched crumpled cash like lifelines. Behind the announcement was the unspoken arithmetic. Perhaps a third of circulating pounds were fakes. On May 7th, Germany surrendered. London celebrated. Claire filed documents alone. In 1946, she testified at Nuremberg and saw Oberst in the dock, hair white, eyes heavy. For 3 seconds, he found her across the room. Then he looked away. She learned he received 10 years. Von Kleist never appeared. She later heard he died in 1943 on the Eastern Front, walking into Soviet lines as if choosing his own end. Hands remained a blank space she could not fill. By 1950, she had left Memstey 5, married, had children, and worked quietly as a consultant for a paper mill. One day, a letter arrived from Tel Aviv with no return address. Inside was a photograph of an old man smiling in Jerusalem sunlight and a note. "We lived. Thank you." The smile belonged to Solomon Weitzman. She stood by the window with the photo until tears came and she found herself smiling back. In 1959, divers at Lake Toplitz in Austria pulled up sunken crates packed with counterfeit pounds, wartime stock dumped after defeat. Reporters swarmed. Her husband read the paper and said casual, "Unbelievable they printed that much fake money." Claire looked at the photos of notes spread in sunlight like heaps of dead leaves and said nothing. In 1972, a young historian knocked and asked questions about Operation Bernhard. She spoke carefully for 3 hours, giving him nothing that could pull her into the open. After he left, the afternoon sun on her garden turned sharp in her eyes. She remembered the single sample note she had kept, never exposed to desert light, hidden for decades in an old suitcase lining. She found it and carried it to the window, held it up to the sun. Within seconds, the edges began to change. Slowly, the word rose through the paper. FALSCH. She smiled, folded the note, and put it back where it belonged. 2003, London. Claire died in her sleep at 96. Her children sorted her belongings and found an old suitcase filled with wartime papers, photographs, and a yellowed banknote bearing a faint word, FALSCH. They did not know what it meant. They knew only that their mother had never spoken of the war. The note was donated to the Imperial War Museum and displayed in an Operation Bernhard case. A small plaque read, "This counterfeit note was donated by a former intelligence officer who requested anonymity. It played a role in a North African turning point operation known as Operation Cutoff. No one knew who the anonymous donor was. But visitors paused anyway, drawn by the quiet weight of paper behind glass. Every year on April 17th, someone left a white rose before the case. No one knew who. Perhaps a descendant who knew, perhaps a stranger who only felt the story in their bones. The rose and the banknote rested together behind the glass, like a desert plant that curls into a dry ball and rolls with the wind through drought, then roots again when it finds water and opens pale yellow flowers. Locals call it the resurrection plant. Some people, even after they die, revive again and again in someone else's memory.